Before my dad died, our lives were already very different. We'd spent the last 5 years watching a little girl who we had all the hopes in the world for fail time and time again, and to come up short milestone after milestone. We'd first noticed her difficulties early on when it was apparent that she had a lazy eye. That prompted a surgery very early on in her life to correct the issue. As a result of this, she would wear an eye patch for almost 8 years after the fact. The second major indicator that things were not quite right was when, at around the age of 2, it began to become obvious that she was falling staggeringly behind when it came to language skills. After extensive testing, it was determined she was hearing impaired and would need hearing aids the rest of her life. Looking back on the situation now, some 20 years later, it should have been painfully obvious to us all that my sister was delayed much earlier than it was. However, my mother, a certified teacher, missed all the signs, and this baffles my mind to this day. I suppose perhaps she was just in denial about her daughter having a learning disability. As each school year came and went, we saw her progress continue to lag behind. No amount of intervention could catch her up to her peers. To me, she was just my sister, and though I hated to see her struggle and lag behind, it meant little to me at the time. I was busy being a young boy and concerned with all the things young boys are: playing in the woods, riding go-karts and four-wheelers, shooting cans with a BB gun, and at the occasional small bird when I was quite certain no one was watching, playing video games and watching TV. I was quite absorbed in my own little world. Little did I know that my entire life would soon be turned on its head. I remember an abnormally cool August morning in 1998. My father was a minister at a small but growing church in the upper part of the state. The night before, I had seen him doing what he was renowned for doing, visiting his congregants. Truly, in my mind, I believe few ministers could compare with the level of service my father provided. This particular night was marked by a chore that, for my father, struck close to home. Shortly before my birth, my father had watched his father battle cancer and ultimately succumb to a heart attack. This night, my father was visiting the family of the local racetrack owner who attended our church. The week before, right before the race had begun, he had collapsed and died of a heart attack. My father, seeking to share compassion with others, went to see the family here almost a week later and check on how they were doing. He left shortly after dinner. Little did I know that that dinner was the last one I would ever have with him. He returned home late. I was lying in bed, still awake, unable to sleep for whatever reason. My father, being a loving man, opened my bedroom door and stuck his head in to tell me good night. Me, being a naive child and not knowing the value of every moment of life, pretended to be asleep and did not respond. I hoped he didn't know that. The next morning, I was greeted by the violent, panic-stricken screams of my name. From the initial sound of my mother's voice, I assumed I must have done something that had upset her the night before. I lay there pretending not to hear. The air was ripped by another violent scream of my name. This time the sound of it sent a cold shiver down to my core. I sprang from my bed and sprinted to the living room of the small parsonage in which we lived. It was there I saw my father collapsed. The events that followed were a blur, all the moments culminating in my father's death of a heart attack at age 40. And so in the course of a day, my whole world shifted. I went from being a young man who could live his life how he chose to a young man who had responsibility. Every moment of my life for the next 10 years would be dictated by caring for my mother and my sister. I've spent my entire life since fighting for my sister, trying to see that she's taken care of. This is a burden. Even at the age of 27, I feel inadequate and inept at handling it. The bright light of boundless future now has a dim pall cast upon it. I know that regardless of where I go in life or what I do, that at some point I will inherit the burden of caring for my sister solely. At some point my mother will utterly wear out, and it will fall to me to make the decisions for a new individual I dearly love, but at times loathe. I would not ask God to take her back, but nevertheless, I would never pray her on someone else either. She is peculiar. She has her own comings and goings, her own patterns and her own idiosyncrasies, as we all do. I know that the burden of her medical needs will fall on me. I know that dealing with her anger and her outbursts will fall on me. There are many days I ask, God, why me? Some people say that those who are blessed with the care of a person with special needs are truly gifted. I don't feel truly gifted. I feel cursed. I'm bitter. I'm tired. All my energy is wasted on pursuing things that will ultimately be shattered by my sister. Though I love her dearly, I wish to God that there were some way for me to live a normal life. There isn't, however. Each morning brings with it the surety that all my decisions in life are ultimately going to be subjugated by a person who is 7 years my junior, who is nearly half my weight and stands a good 5 to 7 inches shorter than me. There's no hope that she will ever be more than what she is. There's no hope that she can learn a trade. She is vibrant, though. She treats each day as its own wonder, and perhaps in that I have something to learn from her.